and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. President Zelenskyy says he's sending his defense minister to peace talks in Istanbul with Russia and insists Putin is not serious about real talks. Donald Trump has touched down in Abu Dhabi, becoming only the second serving US president to visit the UAE. And glamour, cinema and a touch of controversy. The Cannes Film Festival is back in full swing on the French Riviera. Now to our top story. President Zelenskyy says he's sending his defense minister to peace talks in Istanbul with Russia. He also insists Russia is not serious about real talks. Earlier today, the Kremlin confirmed that President Vladimir Putin will not attend the negotiations aimed at ending the war in Ukraine after Zelenskyy challenged him to be there in person. Zelenskyy made it clear he's sending his minister out of respect for Turkey's President Erdogan and US President Donald Trump. Earlier, Trump also commented on Putin's no-show on board Air Force One. Let's take a look.
Nothing's going to happen until Putin and I get together, okay? And obviously he wasn't going to go. He was going to go, but he thought I was going to go. He wasn't going if I wasn't there. And I don't believe anything's going to happen, whether you like it or not, until he and I get together. But we're going to have to get it solved because too many people are dying.
Let's go live to Istanbul to speak to John Cavalage, Senior Editor for Outcome Modelling Analysis at Issue Insight. John, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. We just heard Donald Trump there. He was on board Air Force One earlier, and he said nothing's going to happen until Putin and I get together. Has Donald Trump poured cold water on today's talks, achieving anything?
He's probably poured some water, but believe me, in the last 24 hours, there's enough water being poured to drown everyone. In diplomatic parlance, the last 24 hours has been a disaster for Russian government, for the Ukrainian government, for the US government, and for any government that wants to see the war end. Everything that you could make a list about going wrong has gone wrong. Every misstatement, every unhelpful statement that you would write it in a memo saying, make certain you don't do this, everyone has stepped up and done exactly that.
John, I just want to know exactly what you think has gone wrong and why it's been so disastrous up to this point.
Let me tee up a little bit of as briefly as I can, the history of this. President Putin said, I would like to have direct talks with the Ukrainian government without preconditions on Thursday, May 15th. He said, I will talk to President Erdogan of Turkey to make sure it's okay. President Trump immediately says, Ukraine should go. President Zelenskyy then says, I'll go and can meet with Putin. And then President Zelenskyy says, I'm only going if Putin is going. And then he says, well, I'm not certain if I'll go if Putin doesn't go, but I'm going to go to Ankara and I'll meet with President Erdogan. He goes to Ankara, meets with President Erdogan, and that isn't sure that he'll come to Istanbul, nor that his delegation will come to Istanbul. The Russians, meanwhile, arrive in Istanbul, and they're basically saying in the afternoon, where are the Ukrainians? Then President Zelenskyy, having arrived in Istanbul, says, well, I'm now going to send a delegation. It'll be led by the defense minister, but I'm still not going because the level of officials from Russia isn't high enough to warrant my participation. Then we have a sort of where is he, which is Andrei Yermak, who's the head of the office of the president. He's basically been the lead person during the Biden-Harris administration and during the Trump-Vance administration, and he has led some of the discussions. He was in Saudi Arabia for the first sort of trilateral discussion. And he's also known that he's wearing a suit recently as opposed to wearing the olive military fatigues. Why isn't he leading this Ukrainian delegation? So we're here now where President Putin said Thursday, the 15th of May. He didn't say Friday, the 16th of May. He didn't say either or. He said today. So we're uncertain whether the discussions, negotiations are going to happen. Are they going to happen tomorrow? Are they going to go for a while tomorrow? What's going to happen? So this has just been teed up disastrously.
So, John, what's the answer here? Is it time for Donald Trump to step up and get involved? Is it time for Donald Trump to possibly come to Turkey tomorrow? Is this now what the US have to do to push Putin and Zelenskyy to meet?
I don't think it's necessary or it's the right time. If President Putin was planning to arrive in Istanbul to meet face-to-face with President Zelenskyy, we would have seen the mechanics of a head of state movement, and also you would have heard about the discussions with President Trump's team to make that happen. You would have seen basically there's a tremendous amount of mechanics that move a President Putin or a President Trump, and that's logistically with military aircraft, with security forces, with just everything starts moving, and you see it. You can tell something's going to happen. So we never saw that. Unfortunately, how this should have happened or how this should have gone down was regardless of President Putin's position on attending. President Zelenskyy should have said, I'm going. You come, you don't come. I'm going. I'm going to lead the delegation because I want to try to negotiate a ceasefire. I want prisoner exchanges. So there are other issues simply besides negotiating a peace agreement, negotiating an end to the war. And there are these steps, and they're important for Ukraine. So that's what he should have done, as opposed to he let his ego get in the way and is now, well, the Russians are sending this level, I'm sending this level. There's a reality here. Russia attacked Ukraine. Russia has the bigger army. Russia's inflicting more damage on Ukraine. Ukraine is the victim. Ukraine is trying to get the aggressor to stop. Therefore, you pull out every tool you have. And President Zelenskyy himself is a good tool. He should have been leading. He should have said, I'm going to sit there. I'm not going to like it, but I'm going to try to make something happen, because you never know the result of the dialogue behind closed doors, nuances, somebody saying, well, let us take that back. You never know. And finally, someone's title is not always indicative of who they are. When President Zelenskyy says that President Putin makes the decisions, he's right. President Zelenskyy makes the decisions. President Trump makes the decisions, but not in vacuums. They have people around them. And sometimes the most important people don't have the most important titles. And that's what was missing today, an appreciation of that.
So, John, I know that you're in Istanbul currently, where the delegations are meeting. But my question to you now, after what you said, Zelenskyy almost let his ego get in the way. Putin hasn't arrived. So what is actually next for these peace talks after today? Is there any hope going forward?
Well, it goes to the question that I didn't answer, which was about President Trump and President Putin getting together. President Trump said, I need to sit with Vladimir Putin and make this happen. Now, that sort of puts him back into the bilateral where he and his team during the last weeks have been trying to extract themselves, saying, we're going to step aside if Russia and Ukraine don't talk, if they don't make something happen. We've given it all that we can. We're going to step back. If they want to kill each other, they're going to kill each other. But we're sort of done. And I think President Trump is capable of walking away, but he doesn't want to. And I think that what he's seeing is President Zelenskyy may not have enough to give President Putin now to get President Putin to agree to what President Trump really wants, which is the 30-day ceasefire. Because once he can get that ceasefire, from his perspective, he's finished. Because every time he's talked about, since he's became president, talked about what he can do, it's about the ceasefire. Then we use that time to try to build mechanisms to then discuss the process for a peace treaty. But stop killing each other while you're talking. Once he gets that set, I think he's going to find it very easy to say, guys, I fulfilled my role. The killing has stopped. Nobel Prize folks, take that into consideration. But now it's up to you. And if you start killing each other again, I can wash my hands of it, because what else can I do? This is between you two.
John Cavalage, a senior editor for outcome modelling analysis at Issue Insight. It's always brilliant to have you on the show. I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
We can now go to Bodrum to speak to retired Turkish Ambassador Cengiz Firat. Thank you so much for joining me, Ambassador. I appreciate it. So Zelenskyy says Erdogan agrees that Crimea is Ukrainian territory. Crimea has been a massive sticking point in reaching a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. And from my previous conversation, we know that this is a complex set of negotiations. What do you make of these comments from Erdogan?
I think President Erdogan has been very outspoken about this from the onset. As Turkey, we've never accepted the annexation of Crimea. Crimea is part and parcel of Ukraine. And no matter what happens in the ceasefire negotiations, Crimea will be part of those negotiations. But as President Zelenskyy stated today, it's not up for negotiation. It's a sovereign part of Ukraine, and it will remain as such. And this is the way President Erdogan also sees it. What's important in today's negotiations, maybe I'll just like to add a little bit to the previous speaker. I see it from a little bit different nuance. I think we're on the right track. We need to have calm heads. When you look at the Russian delegation, it was interesting what they mentioned today. They said they see this as the third meeting that is taking place in Istanbul. So they're seeing this as technical. They've stated that they're seeing this as technical level negotiations leading to a possible ceasefire. Let's build on that. I think President Zelenskyy was very right. He put everything out on the table and he said, I'll be there if you're going to come. And if you look at it from the point of view of the Russians, they said, well, we never said President Putin will be coming. So we have this game of who's going to lead which delegation, etc. And President Zelenskyy today, after speaking with President Erdogan, said, okay, I'll send a delegation to Istanbul, and it will be headed by my Minister of Defense, which is a quite high-ranking official in comparison to the Russian delegation that is already in Istanbul. I don't agree with the fact that President Zelenskyy should have met the Russian delegation that is there. That doesn't happen in international relations. In diplomacy, in politics, in high-level politics, a president doesn't go and meet technical-level people. So he was quite right in sending his Minister of Defense, which is already a higher-level delegation than the Russians. So let's see if this negotiation will take place, whether they will meet face-to-face after 3 years. It could happen tonight. It could happen tomorrow morning. We don't know. But what is good is that some sort of momentum has started. And it will build in diplomacy, in foreign relations, international relations. We've started this momentum, and I think it will carry on. What is needed, of course, President Trump, President Erdogan, Zelenskyy, they all want a 30-day ceasefire from which they can build a much-lasting ceasefire, maybe hopefully an end to the war, which we all want. This is where President Erdogan and Zelenskyy were concentrating on during their talks today in Ankara. And let's hope that the two delegations actually do meet face-to-face in Istanbul or either today or tomorrow. It doesn't matter whether it's going to have an end result that we all want straight away. It's a process. It might take time, but it's a positive process as far as I see it.
So I understand that you have a more positive spin on this compared to my former guest, John, who said this was disastrous. Basically, everything has gone wrong when it comes to the meetings today between Ukraine and Russia. And you seem to put a positive spin on what's happening right now, forward momentum in these peace talks. But let's be honest, it's been nearly 4 years of war, of bloodshed, as Donald Trump said. Vladimir Putin is nowhere to be seen. Donald Trump didn't come because Putin didn't come. Zelenskyy wants to meet with high-level delegation team. He's there. So what do you propose? What's the next step towards a ceasefire?
I think we all want the same thing. I think we all want an end to the war. I think we're all on the side of peace, and as soon as possible, and negotiations to achieve that as soon as possible. How that's going to achieve is, I see it in this point of view, from this point of view. I think the pressure is on the Russian side entirely right now. I don't think Zelenskyy has lost anything. I don't think the Ukrainian side has lost anything. On the contrary, President Zelenskyy came to Turkey. He showed good faith. He said, I'm here, I'm willing to meet. But of course, as a head of state, he wants his counterpart. Okay, the Russian head of state wasn't here, but the Ukrainians also played the game well, as far as I can read it, and negotiations hopefully will start. It will be disastrous if there will be no negotiation. Then it will show that the Russian side is not ready for negotiations. That is where I would agree with the previous speaker. But going forward, we need to start face-to-face. This is the beginning of something. We can't say after 3-4 years of fighting each other in the trenches non-stop that suddenly with just one meeting you can finish everything. It's one-stop shop. It's not. It's a process. And I think we have enough pressure from the US, from President Trump, from the European Union, from all the sides, from the Gulf states, from Saudi Arabia, from all the countries, including Turkey, to make sure that everybody comes around the table. We shouldn't get bogged down on which level was the delegation headed, and did they come, did they not come? They will come at the end of the day, we're hoping. If it doesn't happen, of course, you could say it's disastrous. It didn't go well this time, but there's always a next time. It shows the willingness from both sides that, okay, enough pressure has built on both sides not to continue the war, and external pressure from other countries around the globe to tell them, listen, guys, calm down, please have a ceasefire and sit down for peaceful negotiations and settlement of this war. This is how I see it.
Can I just ask you something very briefly? And I want to ask you about NATO. NATO foreign ministers have been gathering in Turkey today. This is for informal talks about boosting defence across the alliance. Of course, we know that these are top conversations happening at the moment. Is Turkey prepared to boost its military spending? And would Turkish troops ever be on the ground in Ukraine?
As far as Turkey is concerned with this, well, diplomacy has been at the forefront in these last couple of days here in Turkey. You're right, the NATO ministers of foreign affairs, all of the Europeans, Marco Rubio included, are in Antalya, in a different city in Turkey. And what's happening is that they're deciding a couple of things. One of them is a huge boost in military spending. Rearmament for all of NATO member states, including Turkey. And Turkey has been doing quite well in its rearmament process, in its military industrial capacity building, etc. But now there's a decision that will be taken by the official, because today was an unofficial meeting in Antalya of the ministers of foreign affairs. But in the NATO official meeting, which will take place in, I think it's in July, if I'm not mistaken, they will take a decision to really put the ceiling really high for all NATO member countries, including Turkey. Concerning Ukraine, I'm not quite sure whether NATO will get involved on the ground with boots on the ground, but what Turkey has done is it's been very, very clear. The territorial integrity of Ukraine is very important for Turkey. Crimea, we have Crimean Tatars. who are our kinsmen, who live in Crimea, who've lived in Crimea for all the hundreds of years past, maybe thousands of years, and we support them as well. But we also have a very good relationship with Ukraine and with Russia, and we want them to stop. We want them to stop this bloody war, and it's been going on too long, and we all need to put pressure on both sides to stop it. I'm hoping that it doesn't boil down to further escalation in bloodshed, in fighting. As you pointed out, there's a possibility that that Russia will not stop. If that happens, what's on the cards? The European Union member states decided that they will put even further sanctions on Russia. And NATO has decided, and the Secretary General made it very clear yesterday in his press conference, that NATO will really build up its armaments, its defense capability to such an extent that if Russia thinks about doing something vis-a-vis NATO countries, it has to think not twice, 3 times, maybe 1,000 times, because it will be a total destruction of Russia. Therefore, when you look at things from that perspective, it looks very gloomy, but hard politics is being played out in terms of NATO-Russia relationship. But I'm hoping that things will not go down that lane, and I'm hoping that the international pressure will pay off and Russia will come to the table slowly, slowly. I don't think they will come straight away with Putin. I don't even think they will come straight away with a minister. It will start technical level, then ministerial level, then it will be with presidents involved. This is how I see it.
Cengiz, Firat, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your insights.
You're welcome.
Now, Donald Trump has been welcomed to the United Arab Emirates by the country's president after stepping off Air Force One. He was shown around the Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi before attending bilateral meetings. This evening, Trump will be given a state dinner like his visits to Saudi Arabia and also to Qatar. For more on this, I'm joined by Dr. Elie Al Hindy, Professor of International Relations at the American University in the Emirates. Dr. Elie, always lovely to have you on the show.
Always a pleasure.
So, Dr. Elie, first of all, we've seen Donald Trump, of course, he's landed in Abu Dhabi today. But how would you compare the reception and strategic priorities of Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the UAE during Donald Trump's visit? And what stands out about each different stop he's made?
Sure. We're yet to see the details of the Emirates trip, but in general, we can see that there's a lot of commonalities. The focus on 2 things, the focus on the economic partnership, of course, and of course the beautiful aspects of tradition and the welcoming and the dancing and specific things. So for example, in KSA, he visited Diriyah, the whole huge project that is happening there. In the UAE, the Sheikh Zayed Mosque specifically. And in Qatar, the beautiful visit that was done to the airbase, the Al Udeid airbase, which is, I think, one of the largest, if not the largest, US airbase outside the USA. Now, the main difference, I think, that stood out very significantly, we all thought that this is going to be it. And the preparations were that all the visit is going to be mostly about economics. This is what interests Trump predominantly, but we saw a huge diversion into politics in KSA specifically, giving KSA that leadership role on politics and making a breakthrough on very key files that we saw.
Yes, Dr. Elie, actually, that's something that I wanted to ask you next. I feel like this trip, it was touted that Donald Trump was going to come here to do mega deals. It was all going to be about investment and money But I think the foreign policy shift during his trip has almost dominated the news agenda. Of course, we saw him met with Syria's new leader, al-Sharaa, and lift sanctions on Syria. We've heard from Hamas today that they are in direct talks with the US. I don't know what you make of that kind. Would this foreign policy shift happen if Trump wasn't in the region?
No, definitely. I think we saw 2 complementary aspects of, we might say it, the Trump doctrine in a way. One focus is, of course, he plays it also on the internal politics of blaming the neocons of all that interventionism that they have done. But also, actually, it's a revision of the US policy in the region, how the US have been telling leaders of the region what to do and how to do it and so on. And that was a very interesting revision, saying, I will not do that because you guys know how to manage your region better and how to move it forward. And you have done it beautifully. You have done it the Arabian way. This is a huge foreign policy shift. And this complements together with the fact that he is seeing the files, the major files in the region, in a way that is a bit closer to the Saudi rhetoric, to the Arab rhetoric, than what we used to by the US, which is very much closer to the Israeli perspective of things. So on Syria, on Iran, on Palestine, on Lebanon, we've seen his rhetoric, his words become much closer to the Saudi vision of things and the Arab vision of things. And this is a huge shift that we need to see how will it develop further.
Yes, indeed. But Dr. Elie, we've talked about economic mega deals, and Donald Trump's had a lot of wins while he's been here in the Middle East, hasn't he? He can go home and he can definitely make his base in America, the America First base, very happy. And I was just looking at the markets today on Wall Street, and they actually opened much lower, but we've seen them tick slightly higher. And I wonder, you know, with the tariffs that Donald Trump has put in place and just some of the reaction on Wall Street, I know it's, you know, still lower, but has made a rebound. Why do you think this is happening?
I think it is expected. It is the direct result of the tariffs, and everybody expected that the market is going to take a hit. Now, I think this trip came at the very correct moment for Trump to say, okay, we know that this is going to happen. We know that this is temporary because eventually the American economy will pick up. And for the American economy to pick up, we need these huge foreign direct investments. And today in the world, foreign direct investment of such a magnitude can only come from the Gulf. And we've seen him pick up trillion after trillion dollars as if it is, you know, something like that. Probably another trillion from the UAE tomorrow or tonight, we'll see. But definitely these huge investments and partnerships also, because we've also seen huge American companies wanting to invest in the Gulf and declaring new partnerships in the Gulf. So it is a huge partnership that will definitely rebalance the trouble from the tariffs, hoping that on the longer term, the American economy will pick up.
Yeah, definitely. But Dr. Elie, I just wanted to say, what could be the longer term impact of this visit for US Gulf relations, but also diplomatically and economically? Do you think we're going to see a shift now going forward between how the US and the Gulf countries speak to each other and trade, and almost, you know, AI's been a big thing?
Well, he said that KSA and the Gulf region is the bedrock for security and prosperity, and this is a huge. I think these two themes are going to be the themes of this strategic partnership, as it was called. It's no longer a dependence. It's no longer a protection. It's no longer just selling weapons. It's now a significant partnership where both partners come in and contribute to that strategic vision of stability and of prosperity.
And Dr. Elie, I have you on my other show, on W News Extra, and we always say Donald Trump has just looked so happy in the Middle East, hasn't he? He's loved it. He's loved the hospitality.
And we do the hospitality very well.
Oh, the best, yeah, definitely, the best in the world.
No, I think he is enjoying his time. Now we're yet to see about that plane that he was offered as a gift. How will that play? Because significant opposition to this kind of gifting to the American president. But definitely altogether, the culture, as we said, the ceremonies, the state dinners, the cultural aspects have been amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Elie Al Hindy, thank you so much for joining me. It's been great to have you on this show. Thank you. A spokesman for Hamas has confirmed the militant group is in direct talks with the United States over peace in Gaza. In an interview with Al Arabiya English's Counterpoint, the group also said it believes Donald Trump can help broker a deal. It comes after Israeli forces launched a series of airstrikes overnight across central and southern Gaza, targeting what they say were Hamas military sites. According to the Hamas-run civil defense agency, at least 94 people have been killed. Our correspondent Trent Murray sent us this report from Tel Aviv with the latest there.
Well, for the second day in a row, we are witnessing a major uptick in the number of Israeli airstrikes across multiple locations across the Gaza Strip. There is a lot of focus on Khan Yunis in the south, where a cameraman for the Associated Press reported 10 separate airstrikes. We do know that the Nasser hospital in the region has been receiving a number of patients following those airstrikes. The eyewitness report suggests that not only is the emergency department and the morgue quite full, but in many cases, multiple bodies were brought in the same body bags, just given the sheer scale of the number of people that were killed. Those airstrikes are thought to be around the European hospital, of course, which we have been tracking now for several days after that major airstrike on the facility on Tuesday. The IDF has claimed responsibility for that, saying they were targeting an underground Hamas bunker. Speculation continues to mount over whether Mohammed Sinwar was in that bunker at the time, the current leader of Hamas in Gaza, who of course replaced his brother Yahya Sinwar following an Israeli attack in October last year. But it's not just in the south where we are seeing this. Jabalia in the north has seen several airstrikes, as well as Gaza City. Now, Gaza City in the past 24 hours has seen one of the biggest evacuation orders issued by the IDF since this war began. It's thought that hundreds of thousands of people there who were sheltering in places like schools and hospitals have now been told to move out as those airstrikes begin following that evacuation order. It of course comes as there had been some hope earlier in the week following the release of one of the hostages that maybe ceasefire talks could be nearing some form of conclusion, but the facts on the ground suggest that the Israeli army is upping the tempo of its operations rather than stepping back. Of course, while all of this is happening, the humanitarian situation on the ground does continue to remain dire. A number of aid groups are warning about shortages of food and clean drinking water and medicine following that blockade introduced by the Israelis all the way back on March 2nd. It does remain in place now, but we have had a statement from a private aid organisation. They are known as the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF. They are an American group that have been created in recent months with cooperations with the Israelis. Now, what they are saying in this statement is that they are preparing to take over the delivery of aid into Gaza by the end of this month. They are also claiming that in the interim, Israel is going to lift its blockade to allow some of those essential supplies into the Strip. We've not had an official word yet from Israel on that suggestion, but that would likely be some welcome news for those aid groups. They are saying that up to 25%, roughly 500,000 people in Gaza, are now at risk of starvation. That international pressure continues to grow. We are, of course, keeping a close eye on this. If that aid delivery does take place, I think it will likely be welcomed. But at the same time, we do know that the United Nations has expressed concerns about private organisations taking over aid delivery. UN groups like UNRWA are just saying that private groups don't have the resources and know-how to properly deliver the right amount of food and essential supplies that is needed. The Israelis, though, of course, continue to have major distrust of UNRWA, given what they say are its links to members of Hamas. Of course, that is an accusation UNRWA denies, but needless to say, if there is some sort of breakthrough on aid delivery, I think it will be welcomed by many of those aid groups who are continuing to sound the alarm in the Gaza Strip. Trent Murray for Al Arabiya News in Tel Aviv.
Glamour, cinema and a touch of controversy. The Cannes Film Festival is back in full swing on the French Riviera. But alongside the glitz, New rules are shaking up tradition, and one of Hollywood's biggest action stars, Tom Cruise, has also made a return to the red carpet. For more on this, I'm joined from Cannes by entertainment reporter Stephanie Takyi. Stephanie, it's great to have you back on the show again. Let's first of all start with the atmosphere. What's the energy like on the ground at Cannes this year?
Leigh-Ann, well, the stars are definitely out in full force in the French Riviera. It feels like it's just been bubbling up over the past 2 days since the opening on Tuesday. And to be honest, Leigh-Ann, it's been quite eventful. Usually it's by the second week, everything starts picking up. But within the first few days, there's been a lot of controversy. There've been a lot of films that have already been screened. And of course, the fashion on the red carpet have already been making their statements.
I always love the fashion and the red carpets. And let's talk about that, Stephanie, because Tom Cruise, he's made headlines with his appearance. Can you tell us more about that moment and the screening of the latest Mission Impossible movie? I see Tom Cruise has grown his hair a little bit, actually.
You know what, Leigh-Ann, people have been asking, hasn't time touched Tom Cruise, because he's 62 years old. He's coming for the final reckoning of his Mission Impossible saga. And the stunts he does in the film is incredible. But when he appeared on the red carpet yesterday, he spent over 30 minutes posing for selfies with fans. But what people were talking about the most was his shoulder-length hair. People are quite surprised at his age how he has such a good head full of hair. There was less fanfare from Tom Cruise in comparison to 3 years ago when he came for the Top Gun Maverick premiere. He came on a helicopter. There was a full force of glamour with him. But yesterday was quite subdued for what will be his final outing for the Mission Impossible franchise.
Yeah, I can see Tom Cruise there. I always wonder what he does to stay so young. But let's move on. There are new red carpet rules this year. What's changed and how are people reacting to this, Stephanie?
Leigh-Ann, you know, with Cannes, we love the glamour of the red carpet. It's where actresses and some actors feel they can express themselves through their outfits. They work with designers for months on end. And the festival have now changed their rules, surprising to all, including Halle Berry, who's a part of the jury, who had to change some of her designs because now they're saying you can't wear dresses that feature nudity. And also you can't have these long, voluminous gowns anymore because they're saying it interrupts the flow of guests walking up those famous red steps. And, you know, this is all very last minute and it was only revealed during the weekend. So as you can imagine, a lot of actors and a lot of the people who are attending Cannes have had to stick to the rules because if you don't adhere to it, you would not get permission to go and see the films.
So no racy dresses on the red carpet, but which films... Yeah. I know, because, you know, the Vogue event they just had recently, Stephanie, that was quite racy, I thought, those outfits, so it's a bit of a shift.
There has been a shift, but last year, Leigh-Ann, it was like there was this trend for nudity on the red carpet at Cannes. So it was like this case of one-upmanship between a lot of actresses wearing as revealing clothes as possible. But I think what organisers are trying to do now is they're trying to bring decency back to the festival in terms of the fashion. And what's happening, it seems like the fashion sometimes overtakes the talk about the films, which is what Cannes is all about.
Oh, I always want to talk about the fashion, but just quickly, before I let you go, let's talk about the films. Which ones are creating the most buzz?
Well, today we had one film called The Sound of Falling, which is about intergenerational trauma, which I think a lot of the jury are quite excited about, and the reviews have been quite positive. When we're talking about the stars coming out, they will also be coming out for Wes Anderson's film, The Phoenician Scheme, and that features Scarlett Johansson, it features Benedict Cumberbatch. So when we're talking about films that will bring the stars in, I think that's one of them, but they tend not to do well when it comes comes to getting the Palme d'Or. Also, as you can imagine, there's been a lot of politics that's been involved with this Cannes and the films that have been on show. There's one documentary which is really sad. It's called Tie Your Hands to Your Soul and Walk, and it's about a photojournalist in Gaza who unfortunately lost her life after they announced that the documentary will be in the competition. So Cannes is facing a lot of pressure to talk about their political stance, and I predict they will use it by picking a film which has a political message for their Palme d'Or.
Entertainment reporter Stephanie Takyi, it's always great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Bonsoir.
Bye. A reminder of our top stories. President Zelenskyy says he's sending his defense minister to peace talks in Istanbul with Russia and insists Putin is not serious about real talks. Donald Trump has touched down in Abu Dhabi, becoming only the second serving US president to visit the UAE. And glamour, cinema, and a touch of controversy, the Cannes Film Festival is back in full swing on the French Riviera. And that's all from us on W News. Counterpoints with Melinda Nusafora will be coming up next. Plus, of course, we'll be back in a couple of hours with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you for watching.